All right, so probably the first thing we'll look at is just declaring and initializing. So if you want to declare or initialize a matrix, very, very similar to declaring or initializing an array, you're going to use that double subscript that I mentioned, okay, 2 sets of brackets. You can name your matrix on the left side of those subscripts. You can name your matrix on the right side. You can attach the subscripts to the int. You know, like we saw before, it really doesn't matter. So real similar to like working with arrays, there's like a lot of freedom there. Okay, so if you want to, you can just go ahead and initialize like the dimensions of the matrix at first. So if we did this, this would just create a matrix with 2 rows and 5 columns. So it would be capable of holding 10 values, okay, like 2 times 5. They would all be set to 0 initially. Every value would be set to 0. We could also do this over 2 lines of code. So I could just simply declare that AA is a matrix name, and then I could initialize it on a second line of code like I've done here. Like I said, this matrix, okay, AA will have 2 rows and 5 columns. Okay, another way to think of that is that it has 2 arrays, both of length 5. Okay, because that's really what a matrix is. You're just putting arrays, plural, inside of an overall array. Okay, this matrix right now by default would have all values of 0. Right? We've seen that just like we saw previously with an integer array. So by default, everything would be initialized to 0 here. Okay, well, that's one way we could do it. All right, another way we could make an array is we could go ahead and just put the values in right up front that we wanted. So for example, what I can't do is I can't just put in some numbers like 1, 2, 3. That's going to be a compile error because I'm trying to create an array, but I've declared that BB is a matrix. So I'm expected to actually put an array into this array. Okay, this would no longer be a syntax error. That's kind of silly though. I mean, why make that a matrix? That might as well just be an array. A matrix is built to hold multiple arrays. So now I have 2 arrays inside of my overall array. Okay, I could put a third array in there. I could put as many arrays into this array as I wanted to. Okay, and I could just keep going. And so, for example, this matrix now has 4 arrays within it. Okay, this is a 4 by 3 matrix. It has 4 rows and 3 columns. Now, why do we say, like, what do we mean by rows and columns? Well, this is one way, like the way I've written this out is fine here. You know, you saw that it compiled. What we might do if we were initializing a matrix like this is we might actually write it in more of a rectangular fashion. This is still considered one line of code. Okay, I only have 1 semicolon, so it's still, the computer sees this as just one line of code, but this has a bit more of a matrix feel or appearance to it. So right here, this is like my row 0. Okay, if I was referencing row 0 of the matrix, I would be talking about this particular array that holds the 1, 2, 3 values. Okay, so this obviously then, this would be row 1, row 2, and my final row would be row 3. I would say that there's 4 rows, but they're indexed 0, 1, 2, 3, just like we've seen, you know, so many other times in Java. And then if we were talking about the columns, Okay, the columns of this matrix are 0, 1, and 2. So the columns are listed vertically. Like column 0 contains the 1, 4, 9, 0 elements. Okay, then there's column 1, column 2. Overall, there's 3 columns. So like I said, this is what we call a 4 by 3 matrix. Okay, 4 rows, 3 columns. It's capable of holding 12 values. This is what we call a rectangular matrix. That just means that every row has the same number of columns. Now, that's nice when that happens. It makes it a little easier to work with, but it's not technically a requirement. So I could make another matrix, okay, and make it not rectangular. This is what we call a ragged array. And like we saw with the arrays class, another way that you can declare and initialize is you can put that kind of like a little bit more formal constructor feel to it. And I'll make my first array here have 4 values. Okay, my second array I'll put 3. And then in my next one I'll just put an 8 and a 9. And I'll give it one more. This is not a rectangular array. So I can't really say that this is like a 4 by 4 array or a 4 by 1 array. It doesn't really have rectangular dimensions, so we wouldn't list it that way. This is called a ragged array. Every row has a different number of columns to it. Perfectly okay. The Java can handle this type of array. It's not a big deal. The College Board has promised on your AP exam to only present you with rectangular arrays. So it's just like one less thing you have to worry about. Okay? So it's not really a big deal. But anyway, here's sort of 3 different ways that you can declare and initialize a matrix. And it should look very familiar to you because it looks just like how we declared and initialized arrays before break. The difference is now everything is doubly subscripted. I mean, that's, okay, one of the main differences.